Welcome to the first edition of VU Sports Night. I'm Drew Taylor, and joining me to my right is Mike Targonski, General Manager of WVUR and Sports Staff Writer for The Torch. Also, we have Chris Kleinhahn-Schultz, who's the Sports Director at WVUR and also a contributor for The Torch. First thing, guys, what are your thoughts on this last week's VU football game against Franklin, and what are your expectations the rest of the way?
Well, for the first about 2.5 quarters, I'd say it was a pretty good football game overall. Valpo had offense going for it, something that it really hasn't had since the 2008 season. The big issue, though, is the defense, which really kind of looked just like they did in the previous season when they gave up about 40, 50 points a game. So in one respect, you look at it like half the game was pretty good. Valpo was really the aggressor early on in the first, kind of faltered on late. But also on the offensive side of the ball, they looked a lot better than they did defensively, and it's easy to see that the defense really needs some tune-ups if this team's going to go anywhere.
I saw a lot of progress from the offensive line. There was finally some pass protection back there, some holes opening up, a lot of big plays, a lot of explosiveness for the offense. But you mentioned the defense. It looked like they might have tired out a little bit in the second half. I think when it was 28-14 and there was an interception by Bryce Lamore deep in Franklin territory, or in Valpo territory, on the punt that went on a 4-and-out was really the momentum shifter. Franklin put up 2 scores before half, tied it up, and then the second half was just all Franklin, and I think that they just wore out at the end there.
Yeah, the defense does look like it's the 2010 defense, but the offense is coming along. Switching gears, guys, let's go to the volleyball team. Will they take a step back this year, or do you think you'll see some improvement?
I think that you'll see some improvement. I think that you might look at it and say they're replacing with a lot of younger players, a lot of unknown players, but I think the versatility of this year's team, a lot of players who could play both front and back, and they have a lot of weapons on that front line. And for the games that we saw this weekend in the tournament, when you have Katie Britton and Amy Grossbeck coming off your bench, that's pretty good tandem for you off there.
Yeah, this Valpo team has shown a lot of versatility already. In 8 matches, they've had 7 different starting rotations. That and something really rare to this team, and I got this stat from Aaron Levitt, one of the sports information directors, is that there are 7 players on this team heading into the Golden Dome Invitational of Notre Dame, 7 of them that are averaging 2 kills per set. And that's just amazing. There are so many weapons that they're able to use, and it's a lot of younger players stepping in, also really kind of making a name for themselves. Someone like, middle blocker / right side Morgan Bile, who's doing a fantastic job. And Ellen Vandenberg and Janelle Hobbs, a couple of freshmen from last year's Giant recruiting class, they're stepping into better roles as well. On paper, it doesn't have the name appeal, say, that like a Tara Diebler or Katie Lehman gave to them last year. But all in all, this actually could be a much better team. And just with the versatility and all the options they're showing already, they look like they can make that extra step in Horizon League play.
Yeah, it's amazing how Coach Karen Avery just continues to recruit very well, always gets good young talent for this team.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they're rebuilding, last year. I'd say retooling. Sure. Getting more players. They had a lot of middle blockers that are playing now, and Janelle Hobbs and Ellen Vandenberg, who really didn't get much playing time last year because you already mentioned Diebler and Lehman from a year ago. But Morgan Bile, as you said, too, is coming up big with some blocks. And, some of those players are going back and serving, so got to play the back row as well. Like I mentioned, the versatility. You didn't really see much of that the year before.
Karen's opening up to many more looks. Katie Britton's been going back and serving quite a bit more, and Lindsay Hauk, someone who redshirted last year, is playing a little bit more on the back as opposed to her position, which indicates she'd probably be a front row player. And it goes back to when Angie Porcher was around, because that was pretty much the focus of the Valpo offense, trying to set up Angie Porcher to get her 20, 30 kills a night. But now there isn't that one highlighted player, and that also makes it a lot more difficult for Valpo to be scouted out, because anybody could step in and play well. And someone else we didn't talk about earlier, Mary Dent, she's kind of been a reserve throughout her Crusader career, but she stepped up, especially at this volley brawl that Valpo hosted over the weekend, and she had some really good matches as well. I mean, you never know with this team who's going to be that really good player, but 1 or 2 people are always going to step up.
Yeah, there's a ton of depth.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have for Coach Karen Avery. Almost too much talent on that team. Anyone can step up at any time. Guys, let's switch to more of a general question. Which Valpo team do you guys think has the best chance to win a Horizon League title this year?
Well, you kind of want to change the topic, but I think I'm going to keep it the same and go with this volleyball team. They've been pretty consistent over the last few years. If you look at it either from the regular season perspective or the tournament perspective, they've had technically 4 second-place finishes, a couple runner-up appearances inside the Horizon League tournament, and a couple of second-place finishes in the regular season, and they've been so consistent. 20, 25 wins every season, a whole boatload of talent to go to, in the starting lineup or off the bench. They always seem to look like that team that has the best chance. But kind of mix things up a little bit. I think some other team, a little further down the road that we could look at is maybe this softball team. Sure. They're going to have their last best chance, or maybe a couple of years to win a title, because that large recruiting class that Randy Schneider brought in a few years ago is starting to leave, and that includes pretty much every pitcher that throws regularly on this team, and includes some power hitters like Sarah Strickland and Joylyn Ichiyama. And as soon as those players start to leave, then maybe that softball program could be in a rebuilding state. So this is really their best chance left for maybe a couple of years to win a title.
I was pondering this a little bit while you're talking there. The volleyball team is definitely a very good choice. I think the Crusader baseball team has a very good chance after the way they finished last year. It was a bit of a rough stretch over that spring break trip. They featured them out west for a very long time, and they came on strong at the end of the year. But the team that I think is going to make the most improvements this year, and I think that has a really good chance, is the Valparaiso men's soccer team. I think Mike Avery has done a great job with the program for the time that he's been here. He has a top 25 recruiting class in this year. He's moved some players around. Chad Solds being a little bit more aggressive on the offensive end. Stefan Antoniovic is back on the defense now because of some of the things that scouts have said about him for his potential in the future. And really with Kyle Zobek now in goal, you got to see what he had a couple years ago when Ryan Schwartz was down, and Zobek also got hurt a few years back. So you have a lot of talent there in goal with Zobek, and you know what he can do. He's a very good goalkeeper. And after that 8-0 win at home and a pretty successful weekend this past weekend, I think that men's soccer team, when it comes to conference play, is going to be very difficult. They have a lot of depth as well, a lot of very good players, and they're a very quick offense as well.
I mean, I'll still say where I am with the volleyball and softball teams, but I'd say both soccer squads actually are due for a good year, because the women's soccer team had some holes to fill, but they had a little bit of potential last year, and the men's soccer team looked great on paper, but by conference play, they kind of fell off a little bit, and neither of them made their conference tournament. So both of these teams still bring a lot back, and I think they could do a lot of good work if they get into the postseason. You ask a Mike Avery or a John Maravich on the women's side, all you have to do is get in, win a couple games in a row, and there you are at the top.
They're both 2 years removed from some of the best seasons in program history, and there's still plenty of those players still around that are very capable of producing for them. And I just think the men's soccer team, that the depth they put together, and just Coach Avery, very good coach, very, very aggressive, and he's able to work very well with his players. And like I had mentioned, some of those seniors that they have are almost invaluable to the team, and I think that they probably present the best chance in front of them right now. But I also agree volleyball is a very good choice as well.
I think no matter how you look at it, Crusader Athletics as a whole is on the rise. But that'll pretty much do it for this first segment of VU Sports Night. When we come back, we'll talk about the decline in the Big 12, as well as get their World Series predictions. Stay tuned. Back here on VU Sports Night, Mike Targonski, General Manager at WVUR, and Chris Kleinon-Schultz, Sports Director at WVUR. Guys, let's jump into some national topics here. I want to talk about the beginning of the end of the Big 12 Conference. Texas A&M has already committed to leaving, and there are talks that Texas and Oklahoma are on their way as well. Is this good or bad for college football?
I think all this division realignment is horrible for college football. Colorado and Nebraska getting out of the Big 12, moving over to their respective conferences, making a shift towards, I guess, these super conferences they're talking about. You know, maybe what is it now, the Pac-12? Yeah. Before you know, it's going to be the Pac-32, you know, because everybody's going to realign, and it's going to hurt programs that aren't into these big powerhouses. They're going to hurt the Texas A&Ms. It's going to hurt the Baylors. It's going to hurt the Dukes, because they're going to be stuck in this realignment shift that everyone's trying to go through right now, and they're going to really have no home because they're going to try and stack these conferences, and I don't think that's good for college football.
I wouldn't know for sure if there are any rules that have changed in terms of kind of loyalty that you keep to different conferences, but this almost kind of seems like the early periods of free agency in different sports, because you have so many teams moving around. And something to remember is that a lot of these conferences, when they are made, it's basically geographical. You pick teams right around your area. It obviously helps out the travel quite a bit. But now when you have all these teams, you know, you got a couple of Texas teams within a couple of years that are going to be playing in the Big East. That's going to stretch it out quite a bit. And some of these super conferences, they're going to be like the Mid-Con, which Valpo left basically because there were too many different teams and too many different places that they had to go to. That gets to another big thing. When you have all these super conferences, what happens to those mid-majors?
Right.
Now that everybody's going up to the top, then it increases the distance even further, and you really just have no idea what to expect because you have teams going back and forth all the time now.
Well, bringing up the mid-major, does this mean like you realign conferences per sport?
Yeah.
Because, like I said, you know, you're going to put in, if you're thinking about the way that they're talking about now, you could see, Valparaiso and Illinois in the same conference. That's not going to be a very good move for Valpo. But I mean, that's not going to happen, but I mean, just think about the examples, because that's what it's going to be like nationwide if they start to split up these teams like that. You know, you're talking about cutting down on travel and everything, but at this point, you're cutting time and money out of people for college football because you're losing big rivalries. You're getting Nebraska and Colorado out of a conference that they've been in for a while, that have kind of established themselves. Nebraska in 2001 was in the national championship game, coming from the Big 12. Now they're in the Big 10. The Big 12's losing money off of that. Everything obviously revolves around money, and I think that it's more negative than it's positive for anyone.
It's hard to believe, even just kind of going back to the history, that the Big 12 actually hadn't been around that whole much.
Yeah.
Basically, the Big 8 was the conference before that, and it absorbed a few Texas teams from the Southwestern Conference. But the Big 12 always seemed like a really big school, especially in football, competing down in the South with the SEC. It had a couple of good basketball teams every once in a while, some very good baseball product as well, especially with like the Texas Longhorns in there. But now you take this really great conference, and with the teams that left so far, and the rumors maybe a Texas or maybe even both Oklahoma schools could be out, that could pretty much ruin that entire conference and all that history that has gone along with it. And when you take that, it not only hurts the game itself, but what do you think the fans feel about that too? They're going to hate all these teams in the area now. All the rivalries are gone, and then maybe in the end, a team or a conference just goes right out.
Yeah, what's going to happen to the WAC?
Right. It will be very interesting to see how that plays out. I will say, though, that I think it'll hurt the classic rivalries, you know, things of that nature. But anyway, switching gears to Major League Baseball now, I want to get your guys' American League and National League MVPs.
I think the National League is fairly difficult because I wouldn't say there's one guy that really stands out too much, but I'll say it's pretty much a two-horse race between Matt Kemp of the Los Angeles Dodgers and Ryan Braun of the Milwaukee Brewers. And I'm personally going to go for the latter, especially because not only is Braun putting up some really good numbers, he's in line for a 30-30 season, but he's also leading this Brewers team that really has picked up a surge, has a lot of confidence and swagger, and as a leader of that team, that's kind of like getting bonus points in that. It's not only is the guys with the best numbers, but if you win your division, maybe get close to having a good enough team to win the National League, the American League, or even win the World Series, that's always going to give you that little bit of extra to help you out in the voting. And this whole screwy Dodgers situation, as good as Matt Kemp is, that's going to hurt his chances of voting, you'd like to think, just because the team's kind of floundering a little bit.
I would go with Kemp, I think, because of, one, that situation, but two, take him out of that lineup, and where are they at? You know, everything that's going on with the Dodgers right now, that's the bright spot they have, is Matt Kemp in the middle of the lineup. He's hitting .319. He's got over 30 home runs. He was an all-star for him in the home run derby. They made the joke about him at the ESPYs and stuff, stealing the ketchup packets, but if you remember that one. But, I mean, he's obviously the face of the organization, and like I said, take him out of that lineup. What else do they have? They lost Ethier for the season. Loney's been unproductive. They don't really have that good of starting pitching. There's really nothing else to hang your hat on in terms of the LA Dodgers. It's the most valuable player.
Keep in mind, too, the ballpark that Matt Kemp is hitting into. It's pretty much a pitcher-friendly ballpark.
But keep in mind the team Ryan Braun has around him.
True.
Yeah,
I know you're a Brewers fan here, but
yeah, I knew we were going to get that into the conversation sooner or later. What's good for Kemp right now, he's top 5 in each of the Triple Crown categories, but in terms of where his numbers are at, he's been a little bit slower over the past couple weeks as opposed to Braun, who's really starting to light it up, hit a few more bombs. But that'll be a fun race to watch the rest of the way. Transitioning to the American League, it's always tough to make an argument for a pitcher. No pitcher's won the MVP since Dennis Eckersley did it back in 1992. But if anyone would have a good chance to do it, it would probably be Justin Verlander of the Detroit Tigers. He's on his way to maybe a Triple Crown in all the pitching categories, ERA, wins, and strikeouts. And if he continues to have this really good September and play that off of the rest of the year he's had, it's going to make things really difficult for all those voters.
Yeah, I think Verlander's a good choice, and like you said, it's very difficult for a pitcher to win it. I'm going to go with Curtis Granderson, though. I think Granderson has been the most consistent player in that Yankee lineup, a very good Yankee lineup, mind you. The first player to 20 home runs. He's hitting over 300, and he's also stealing bases for him in the top part of that lineup. We'll talk about divisions here in a moment, and I think the Yankees are going to come away with that division. I think mainly because Granderson's been a mainstay in their lineup for a long time. You know, I think Verlander, obviously, with the Tigers, I mean, what is he at, 21 wins right now?
22.
22 wins? I mean, that's unreal at this point in the season. But I think Granderson, the season he had, the thing about it is this isn't the type of player Granderson's been his entire career. He's been a leadoff guy who strikes out a lot and doesn't really get on base that much as a leadoff guy. But when he gets on, he wrecks some havoc. And this year he's turned in a whole new game of his offense, getting the ball into the gaps, driving in runs, stealing a little bit more bases, and hitting the ball out of the ballpark. Yeah, Yankee Stadium porch helps him, but I think Granderson is a legitimate contender at the top of the MVP race.
A little bit of a pinstripe revival, so to speak.
I will ask you though, Chris, I'm a firm believer in that you make an award for pitchers specifically. Why should that carry over to everyday? I mean, an everyday player is playing 6 or 7 times a week, whereas a starting pitcher pitches once every 5 games.
Well, I made that. I'm going to jump in here. I made that argument a minute ago about Matt Kemp. It's the most valuable player.
Right.
Take out Verlander, and that's the one thing I think people miss out when they get into All-Star contests or voting and MVP and Cy Young is take away that guy.
Mm-hmm. I'll put this out too. Every once in a while when I had these kind of debates, either for a show like this or just with other people, I kind of look at it like, if there was some kind of fantasy draft and I had to pick maybe the best guy from the past season to reorganize, who would I go with?
Sure,
and I mean, I'll throw out also Jose Batista in there, who's had a really good year. But between Batista, Granderson, and Verlander, that's a really tough pick. But when you look at it, if you get an ace at the top of your staff that can fire heat and not only controls pitches but control a game like Verlander does, I think it's hard to overlook. Now, in terms of how the voting's going to come out, because he's a pitcher, I do think, like you said, Drew, that's going to hurt him a little bit. But if he gets at least 2 of those 3 Triple Crown categories, or he's the champion, or if he is the Triple Crown winner as a pitcher, people are going to have to take his case more seriously.
He would throw fantasy baseball into the argument.
All right, so we covered the MVP. Now I want your guys' picks for each division and kind of elaborate on why you picked that.
I think pretty much the NL's wrapped up right now with the Phillies, the Brewers, and the Diamondbacks. They have a 7-game lead, is the smallest lead out of all of them right now. I think that those are pretty much wrapped up as we get into the second, almost third week of September. The AL's a little bit more tighter. The Yankees and Red Sox, 2.5 games separate them, 2.5 separate the the Rangers at top with the Angels. I think it's easy to give Detroit the division right now. They got 9 up on the White Sox, and I'm going to go with the Yankees and the Rangers just based on their pitching and experience.
It's hard to argue with you. I looked through it and basically came up with the same picks. It's really easy, especially because all the teams leading their divisions right now, they just kind of look on paper like they have a really good chance. Texas is coming off a World Series appearance, has a fairly good team, and you always kind of get this Yankees-Red Sox thing, and whoever doesn't win that race generally gets the wild card anyway. So it doesn't matter to a certain extent because once you're in the race, who knows what happens. But the Yankees, especially with their health and the versatility they have, they look like they're the team that could ease up above that race. And the Rangers, with their experience, I think have the same case out in the West.
Yeah, the Yankees are healthier, and I really like Mike Scioscia. I think he's one of the best managers in baseball. But I just think the Rangers, the middle of the lineup, is better. Josh Hamilton, Nelson Cruz. I mean, they really have what it takes to go deep into the playoffs, as we saw a year ago. And they're really not that much of a different team. Obviously, Cliff Lee's gone, but we'll talk about that. Yeah. The Phillies, I don't know. There's a very tough rotation there, and Cliff Lee was a big reason why Texas was able to get so deep a year ago. But I just think that they have such a great lineup. They play very good defense. And they have the pitching, and they have a closer, a shutdown guy at the end. Whereas Anaheim, I couldn't tell you a guy coming out of the bullpen for the Angels.
The AL West will be interesting to see how that plays out, but I want to ask the big question. World Series winner.
Phillies.
I'm going to go with the Yankees on this.
I think the Phillies, they have the lineup. They brought in Hunter Pence. He's doing a fantastic job for them right now. Shane Victorino has been having a good season once again. And then the pitching, I mean, Roy Oswalt's their 6th pitcher, right? Sure. I mean, he's so far down there, and he's one of the best pitchers in the game of baseball, I think, with Roy Halladay and Cliff Lee at the top. You also still have Cole Hamels in there with Roy Oswalt. That's a very good. That's 4. That's a 3-game series. You might only face the top 3, but when you get into a best of 7 and you got to face those 4 in the first 4 games, that's very tough to beat. And put on fact the lineup that they have, I think the Phillies.
Well, Mike, in a 5-game series, hypothetically, don't you think a good offense? Anything could happen. A good offense could defeat that pitching staff in 3 straight games. You never know. I mean,
well, the other team's pitchers are going to have to put up 1 or 0 runs because the Phillies aren't going to give up any.
The Phillies' offense isn't World Series type.
I really don't think that in a best of 5 series we're going to see 5 1-0 ball games. Okay. And I think that's going to favor the Phillies because they have the pitchers that could keep those ball games that way. Sure. Roy Halladay is going to win a game 2-0. Cliff Lee can win a game 1-0, 3-1. Right. And I think that's the difference is their pitching. I'm a firm believer in pitching and defense wins. And if you have the 2 of the best pitchers arguably in baseball right now, 1-2, I think that's very tough to beat.
If you want to look at who's going to win the NL pennant this year, this is a great weekend to watch because the Brewers and Phillies got this nice little bump going, 4 games in a row. And the Brewers look better in the first time that they met, but overall, I mean, it's almost a toss-up because the Brewers definitely have an edge on offense. They have a couple of really good pitchers that they can go to. And they found a way to make LaTroy Hawkins a respectable ball player. I mean, any team that could do that is certainly World Series caliber. They're going to have a lot on their hands, though, with the Phillies this weekend, and also just thinking about in the playoffs, they're probably going to meet at some point in there. It's tough to count out the Phillies because, like Mike, as you mentioned, they have this three-headed monster in the rotation, and they just have a pretty solid ball club. You look at it, though, from my perspective, I could easily see the Phillies winning the World Series. I mean, heck, with a little bit of luck and obviously some good protection, I think the Brewers could decently have a chance. But the Yankees have really been tooling everything together. They have some solid pitching, not only with CC Sabathia, the guy at the top that's getting a lot of attention, but how about this Ivan Nova guy? He has really stepped in, and he could be a guy that could be maybe the second or third guy in the postseason. You have all these Yankee players, and it goes back to the Granderson case too, kind of those Yankee pinstripes, really getting that extra skill and bravado in there. And I think they might have a little bit of trouble in the postseason just kind of getting out, but not as much as, say, the Phillies and Brewers might have, maybe going up against each other. And I just kind of think with the experience factor in and just the all-around production, I would give the Yankees the slight edge right now, but we still have a little bit of a ways to go.
You think the Yankees have enough pitching?
I think they do have enough pitching. I don't know how well it's going to stay healthy. That's been an issue over the past couple of years, but especially with Nova and Sabathia right at the top, and maybe a guy like A.J. Burnett that could give you a quality start, they can find the arms that can get it done.
I would tell you, if you're playing close baseball in the postseason, I think the edge goes to the Brewers. They have a very good bullpen. K-Rod and Axford at the end of the game. If it's a close ball game, I think the edge goes to the Brewers, but I'm going with starting pitching.
That and the Brewers have clutch hitting, too, because they have a pretty solid middle lineup that comes up with late hits.
And a Brewers game is down to a science. Really, if you can get your starter to go through 7, the game's over. You got 2 pretty much top-of-the-line closers, K-Rod in the 8th, Axford in the 9th. Also with that pitching rotation, the top 3 for them, I don't know if they're that much worse than the Phillies' top 3. You got Yovani Gallardo, Zach Greinke, and Sean Markham. I mean, those are 3 great pitchers, and in a 5-game series, who knows? That's what I'm trying to say about it.
Now, I love giving some love to the Brewers, especially because when Greinke Markham got signed in the offseason, my dad, who's a Milwaukee guy, a big Brewers fan, he and I both kind of looked at each other and said, this could be the year for this team. And having the opportunity right before school started to go to a game, I really saw maybe one of the best Brewer games all season. Got some nice tickets right behind home plate, saw them pull 4 double plays and a triple play defensively. They had their defense on fire. Randy Wolf with a great pitching on. He's the kind of guy that's kind of a sleeper pick in there at the very end. It is a shock that he's still around. It's a shock that Hawkins is still around and actually pitching well for that matter too. But with the pitching that they had there, they were able to pitch a shutout. They had a couple of home runs from some of their big bats, guys like Corey Hart and Ryan Braun stepping in there. And if you can have that consistently working, whether you go with the top 3, maybe throw Wolf in as a 4th, this could be the team to look out. This could be that sleeper World Series pick. I mean, they're easily going to have a lot of confidence running away with that Central Division title in the playoffs. Who really knows with these guys?
Okay, wrapping up this conversation quickly, World Series picks again. I know you're talking about a bunch of different teams.
I'm going Phillies, Tigers.
Who wins?
Phillies.
Very interesting pick going with the Tigers. I go Yankees, Phillies, probably take about 6, maybe the full 7 games to get it done.
Just watch out for the Cubs next year.
All right, I want to thank. Yeah, right. All right,
hey,
thanks.
You never know with baseball.
It's always next year.
There always is.
Well, I'm Drew Taylor. I want to thank Mike Targonski and Chris Kleinon-Schultz, and I want to thank you for watching. Stay tuned for next week's edition of VU Sports Night.